keep it rolling, and there's not a whole lot of, like, I don't want to edit as much as possible. Like, I don't want to edit. Like when we did.
At what point should I break into song? Because I do that
about 13 minutes in.
13 minutes in.
This episode of Bourbon Pursuit is made possible through listeners like you, supported through Patreon.
Fred Minnick here with an important announcement. Join me September 21st at the Art of Bourbon, a rare bourbon auction benefiting Louisville Speed Art Museum. I'm the curator, and get this, I've tracked down the 10th bottle of Pappy. Learn more at speedmuseum.org. That's speedmuseum.org. Welcome back to another episode of Bourbon Pursuit. And before we kick off the show, let's go through a little bit of the news. Now, we are entering the release season, the fall release season, which every bourbon nerd goes crazy about. And we've talked about Booker's 30th on the podcast before, but there's two of them that have kind of been the hypes of this past week. And the first one is that everybody has started getting their media samples of the Heaven Hill 27-year-old release. Now, when I say everybody, that means everybody except Bourbon Pursuit somehow. I don't know how it happens, but apparently we're not on the Heaven Hill mailing list. I'll have to figure out if I know somebody that works there. But in regards to the release, it looks like it's getting positive vibes around everywhere. Some people say it's a little too oaky for their palate. Some people say it's right on point. I like a little bit of oak, so I'm hoping I'm going to like it. But if you want to read more, go check out Fred Minnick's review on fredminnick.com to see if it's going to be worth your $400. And that's even if you can even find it. And speaking of Fred, congrats to him on his latest book, Mead, which is being reviewed by the New York Times. So you can go and check it out there. And that's a huge accomplishment. So congrats, Fred, on making that happen. In other release news, Old Forester Birthday Bourbon release has some interesting nuggets this year as well. It was bottled at the new Old Forester Distillery downtown, which we've talked about before. It's an amazing experience. It is a small batch bourbon that's been selected from a single day of production. There is a total of 120 barrels. They were distilled on June 9th, 2006. And this year, the total yield for all of those barrels was just shy of 40%, and 5 barrels were found to be completely empty. This is going to be bottled at the highest proof that they've done, which is 101, and it's going to have a retail price of $99, which is seemingly creeping up every single year, but with supply and demand, really nobody should be surprised. But the good news is that there's going to be somewhere around 14,400 bottles that are going to be available nationwide or wherever you can get them and from previous years. Now, if you are interested in helping support the show and you want to partner with us and you want to reach a wide audience that just loves to drink bourbon, send us an email, team@bourbonpursuit.com, and we can talk about partnership opportunities. Or you can go to bourbonpursuit.com, hit the partnerships button at the very top, and we've got a new media sheet that you can go look at as well. Last week, Ryan, myself, and 4 other Patreon supporters picked out a barrel of Elijah Craig at Heaven Hill. We did have a great experience going through the selection process and taking a tour of the facility. Now, back to the selection process, we had the choice of either 8, 9, or an 11-year-old barrel, and they were all done blind. And of course, as I'd mentioned, I love oak. People love that dark, rich complexity that it brings. We selected the 11-year barrel, and the icing on the cake was that this was from Parker's favorite warehouse in Deatsville, which was Warehouse EE. Now, this barrel, from what we could tell, was unlike any other that we had been able to see before, because the bands on this barrels had ZZ on them, which, if you're familiar with independent stave, they'd usually have either a KY or an MO to depict on where they were built at. So we have no idea where this barrel came from. And the wood grain on it was unlike anything other as well. It was super tight, and one thing that Ryan loved is that it also had a good amount of funk that was built up on it. You could kind of scrape it and just see a bunch of dirt built up. So seeing that good funk is always great. Now, it was almost really too easy to see the color differences between the 8, 9, and 11 years, but we did our best to try to go blind with it. And if you recall, last year's Parker's Heritage release was an 11-year from the same exact warehouses, so perhaps we got one of those barrels that were left around to just mature another year. But the worst part of this is that we had to proof this beauty down to 94. We would give almost anything to make sure that we could get this at barrel proof. But as one of our supporters pointed out, we basically picked out a poor man's Parker's Heritage Promise of Hope, which, if you remember, that was a few releases ago, and this is going to be at 2 proof points lower, 1 year older, and from the same exact warehouse, EE. You can read the entire story on our Patreon page, and you can see why this pick has been dubbed Pump the Brakes. And you can also see pictures of William Heaven Hill's gravesite, and you can go to our Facebook page where we got a chance to see Heaven Hill's barrel rolling team practicing for the Kentucky Bourbon Festival's barrel rolling competition. And we had the Evan Williams Bourbon Experience artisanal distiller, Jody Filiatro, as their keeping time. And as usual, if you want to get in on one of these bottles, support the show on Patreon. And once again, thanks to Keg and Bottle, KEGNBOTTLE, for making this happen out of the San Diego area, or you can go check them out online. Now, Ryan and I, we pride ourselves on being able to spot a pretty good single barrel every once in a while. But like all single barrel picks, you have your choice is really only as good as the barrels that are rolled out on that day. Now, I'm not going to ruin it for you, but we had a great time putting our single barrel BT pick up against the local Kentucky group. Now, one good challenge that you can do for yourself at home is to get a standard bottle of an offering and pair it with a single barrel version of it. You can try them just side by side. This is going to be a great way for you to see how much single barrels can vary. And also, never let those stickers fool you, but they are all fun and part of the FOMO process. Now, if you like what you hear, subscribe to us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. You can watch the podcast on YouTube, and you can like us on Facebook to get all those new posts. And if you want the full show notes with links and pictures, visit bourbonpursuit.com and sign up for our email list. And if you like to scroll through Instagram or read tweets, make sure you follow us on social media, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Bourbon Pursuit. And if you do support us on Patreon and you hit your 6 months at this point, shipments are finally in the mail, and you might be receiving them today or tomorrow. And we also did our giveaway too. If you support the show at $5 or more per month on Patreon, we do a giveaway every single month. And this month was some good Four Roses gear. So congrats to our winners for that too. And if you do support the show, patreon.com/Bourbon Pursuit is where you do it. We've got we got patches that you can put on hats. We've got t-shirts, we've got bottle totes, we've got koozies, we've got access to barrel picks, and even the opportunity to join us on a barrel pick as well. With that, enjoy this week's episode. And here's Fred Minnick with Above the Char.
I'm Fred Minnick, and this is Above the Char. By now, you've likely become your friend and family's bourbon expert. They reach out to you wanting to know the best bourbon to buy for the holidays and ask the typical questions, such as, what's the difference between bourbon and whiskey? And perhaps the greatest misnomer of them all, does bourbon have to be made in Kentucky? That's a question I get a lot, and usually people are in awe when they learn bourbon can be made in New York or New Mexico, and the bourbon is not just made in Kentucky. But occasionally, people object to these facts. Once, while presenting to a room full of people, an elderly lady muscled through the crowd. She walked with a cane and a slight limp. Her flowered dress hovered just above her ankles. She looked like a lovely great-grandma. As she reached me, I felt bad she walked all that way just to talk to me, and thought I should have met her halfway. But then she spoke. "You got it wrong, boy," she said. "I'm sorry, ma'am," I replied. "Bourbon's got to be made in Kentucky." "No, ma'am," I said. In 1964, Congress declared bourbon a unique product of the United States, not just Kentucky. She then poked me in the chest, looked me straight in the eye through her clouded glasses, and said, "Get your facts right, boy." She's not the only older lady who's threatened me over bourbon's definition. For some reason, Kentucky's geriatric community really has a thing for protecting Kentucky bourbon. Interestingly, they're not the only ones spreading this myth that bourbon must be made in Kentucky. But where does it come from? I'm fascinated to learn where these myths originate. Yes, something like 90 to 95% of the country's bourbon is made in Kentucky, and its history is deeply rooted in the bluegrass state. But there was also a time the federal court system recognized bourbon as uniquely Kentucky. During an early 1900s Pure Food and Drug Act libel case, federal attorneys argued a Louisiana distiller had libeled the government's law by labeling blackstrap molasses as bourbon. Among the evidence the judge accepted was that bourbon had to be made in Kentucky. I believe this case emboldened Kentucky to further own the bourbon brand of whiskey. But as strong bourbon interests grew in Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, Pennsylvania, and Maryland, this Kentucky-only sentiment faded on a national level. In the 1930s, the United States required a state of distillation to be listed on the bottle. They didn't want somebody buying New York bourbon after all and thinking it was from Kentucky. Furthermore, Kentucky has always mocked other states for their bourbon efforts. Even today, Governor Matthew Bevin says 95% of the world's bourbon comes from Kentucky, and the rest is counterfeit. So you can understand why people spread the Kentucky misnomer. But let's be honest, for us grizzled bourbon veterans, this question does get old. But we have to remember, too, that we bear the bourbon knowledge, and with that comes great responsibility. We occasionally get an old lady walking up to us, poking us in the chest, and wanting to kick our ass. We just got to be bigger. And that's this week's Above the Char. If you want to learn more about bourbon's history, check out my book, Bourbon, The Rise, Fall, and Rebirth of an American Whiskey. Got an idea for me? Reach out on Twitter or Instagram, at Fred Minnick. That's at Fred Minnick, FredMinnick. Until next week, cheers.
Welcome back to the episode of the Bourbon Pursuit Podcast, the official podcast of bourbon. Kenny and Ryan on the road today in Nicholasville, Kentucky. Actually at an establishment of somebody we had on the show quite some time ago when we talked about cigars, right? That was a great episode, too.
Yeah, it was hotter than shit. And,
we
were drinking bourbon, and hey, sorry, I forgot we were on.
We were on social
Facebook
media.
Live, but
we're all.
Yeah, it only took me a minute to screw that up, but no, yeah, happy to be here because that episode was great. You know, hanging out with Jake and Jeremy, and I'm so glad they invited us down here to Nicholasville to hang out and record.
This is our recording studio for the day, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, but today's topic is always one that is fascinating because, you know, we've talked about it plenty of times. We've Blake has made it famous and said, like, always try blind, right? And today is really going to be about looking at things from a blind perspective. It's also going to be looking at store picks, right? Yeah. Comparing store picks to one another. We're going to be looking at a store pick that hit ultimate heights on the secondary market and kind of really see, like, does it stack up against other ones as well, right?
Yeah, it made Buffalo Trace store pick, like, wall of legends, you know, so. No, yeah, I mean, blind is super important, especially in these, because we picked one barrel, they picked one, so we're like, out the gate, you're like, mine's better. So even if it's not better,
everybody's going to have a little bit of bias to it, right? But I think it's going to be an interesting kind of take just to, figure this out, and we're gonna learn a lot of stuff in the process too. So with that, let's go ahead and introduce our guests. So today on the show, we have Ben Pickett and Paul Warnott. These fellas are part of a barrel picking group. They're also admins of a particular Facebook group that begins with the word bluegrass. Maybe they'll go through some rebranding at some point. Who knows what that looks like? If you want to find out more about getting into the group, I guess start looking through your friends or friends of our group, and you can get your way in. But gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, before we start kicking this off, I kind of want to talk about just blind tasting, because this was something that, Paul, you had talked to me about. You said, come here, like, let's do a blind tasting together. Like, what was your real motivation behind it?
Well, these picks specifically, one of them was super short barrel, so not a whole lot of people were going to get to try it. So I wanted to get it to you so you can taste it and tell everybody kind of what all the hype was about. And our other picks that we've been doing, I don't know, maybe we just got lucky, but they all sold out in just a matter of hours, and that kind of puts pressure on us as a group, but it also, it kind of puts us on the map a little bit.
Absolutely. What about you, Ben? I mean, when you think about how much or how fast your group is selling through bottles, because let's put it this way, right? I mean, you get a barrel, and we'll say it's a nice barrel. It's got 185 bottles. And
Sure.
You've got a group with 1,000 people in it. Like, I mean, at some point, like, you can't really be too far to say like, oh well, it's not like we didn't expect that to happen, right?
Sure. Well, where we are doing them, some barrel picking groups obviously pre-sell everything, and so it's a matter of like first come to post, give me a bottle, goes, and then there's kind of allocation. We go through a retailer, so it is kind of retail style. We announce it's out. So where we do have over 1,000 members, we don't have 1,000 people within a couple mile radius. So it creates a mad rush because people that are members, and we have members that are calling friends from other side of the state, trying to get somebody to the actual store because you have a small window. We've kind of talked about if we want to change it, because obviously we want members to get to try barrels that we've picked, and we have more members than bottles. Of course, like with any other bourbon group, your active base is a lot different than your rolls as a total group. So, I mean, we have a significant size local group, but our core of really active people is significantly smaller. But as far as, what goes with tasting these, I mean, we get our core group of people go and picks. Our admin team goes on all the barrel picks, and then we bring in different members to help select them. So they're kind of like little cheerleaders of every barrel too, talking about them. But it kind of spreads the experience for everybody, and we've been fortunate enough to, get some great barrels, and hopefully you'll agree when you taste a couple of them here in a minute.
Yeah, absolutely. And
I think you got our sloppy seconds from our pick. No, I'm kidding.
And so I guess another part of that, first off, I guess being admins, you're a little spoiled, right? Because you said you get to go on every single pick, right? So I think that's pretty awesome. I think we should start a group then. We should just do that. So we're always on the barrel picks.
I'm in.
We got to find that store.
Yeah, well, it has certainly has some perks, but it's also a big time commitment. I mean, not all barrel picks are glamorous. Some of them might be sending you samples and tasting and trying to pick, or you might go one day and the barrels they roll out don't rock your world. I think people think, obviously if you go pick a Russell's barrel, you can taste barrels until you find what you want for the most part. It's very hard to not get a barrel you're happy with if you go pick Russell's. Some of the programs are going to lay out 3 barrels.
Yeah.
And, you're just hoping that one of the 3 barrels they gave you are good. But when it comes to after, we also try to help our store owner that works with us. We want to make sure the barrels are successful. That's why we come up with themes and stickers and labels. And that's part of, obviously, what caused one of our picks to rise to a different level. Just people love marketing. We didn't intend for anything like that. It was more fun for the group. The name of the barrel was after the actual picking experience, as people got a little tipsy. And so we just kind of went with that theme. But we try to theme most of our barrel picks now with some type of label or sticker. Helps them, most of us have substantial collections. So if you look on the shelf, it's easier to pick out a bottle that has a sticker on it than flipping through 40 name tags on the bottles.
Well, and you made a good point too. I think we met last week about the Russell's picks, how they have the tag you can just slip on over it, the bottles. So this kind of helps put a brand on that specific bottle.
Absolutely. You hate to think that people would consider, faking a bottle and taking the neck tag off of a pick and putting it on off-the-shelf bottle. But, we've had issues in the bourbon community and wine communities and everything else where people do fake bottles. And so having a secondary label protects the people that are collecting to know they're getting what was intended. But we talked about that from another Russell's pick that got a lot of appreciation, raised to probably new heights for a Russell's barrel. It was selling for $250, $300. And but there was people accusing guys of selling a fake bottle because it had the hang tag but without the sticker. Now, I am actually one of the guys that bought a case of that barrel that weren't stickered. So I know that obviously there's some out there that's a true story. But how do you know? And if you're going to spend that much money over retail, you'd kind of like to know that you're getting what you're buying. So I think it's good for collectability. It's also good to protect people, feel confident. If somebody that's not in our local group wants one of our picks, they have to buy it from a member pretty much. Or if somebody had to have told them it was at the store and they got in there before members bought them all. So for outside people to try our barrels, we want them to get the actual bottle. You know, if you try our pick and you think it's terrible and we find out it wasn't even our pick because somebody just switched an egg tag, I don't want that judgment.
Right.
You know, I don't want that on me. So
I guess, Paul, what do you guys see as like the way to help spread this love amount amongst all the members? I mean, are you trying to say like, you know, limit one per person, or like, you know, like it's up to the store's MO of whatever they want to do? Like what do you usually do to try to appease most of the members?
Sometimes like the OKI that was super short or whatever, we did limit those to one. But if there's, you know, a high yield, or if he buys 2 barrels or whatever, then, you know, we just announce it and they come in and get them.
Mm-hmm. Just kind of free for all at that point, right?
I mean, yeah.
Well, good. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's move on to this first. Like, so by the way, this is completely blind tasting, but we have in front of us, we all have 3 glasses. They are marked. Jeremy has done a great job of putting a letter. So we got W, V, and U on the bottom of them, and we're just gonna kind of go through and I guess give ideas or tasting notes.
So are we drinking the same letter at the same time, or just?
Well, I'm assuming. I have no idea. I'm assuming that this is blind. It's blind, but it could be 3 Buffalo Traces. It could be 3 different Russell's Reserves. It could be 2 Buffalo Traces, 1 Russell's Reserve. I don't really know what it is, but
Jeremy's probably just. We're at the mercy of Jeremy.
we're at the mercy of Jeremy right now. So
he's funny. These are all Kentucky gentlemen.
Whatever.
all right, so let's grab W and kind of just like give initial thoughts about it real quick.
I think it smells good.
Smells like bourbon.
It smells like bourbon.
You're right about that, yeah.
I mean, so when you guys are tasting at home, I mean, are you guys trying it in rock glasses? Or are you guys trying to do it in like actual like Glencairns or snifters or something like that? Because you can definitely tell there's a different way to be able to try to nose and get flavors out of a rocks glass versus something different, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, a bourbon glass, a snifter is normally what I'm going to prefer. I think that people, obviously, the whole point is it collects the aroma in that smaller top after the bulbous bottom. So people sometimes don't pay attention to what it's for. It's not to look pretty. It's actually to help with the nose, which helps with the flavor, and that's the whole purpose.
Mm-hmm. So that was pretty creamy. A little spice on the end.
A lot of spice at the end, yeah. You feel the rye notes at the end.
Good typical, you know, bourbon, caramel, vanilla, toffee, whatever kind of flavors you get on the palate, but
it does kind of stick. It lingers a bit on the finish, yeah.
Yeah, it's got a nice hot finish, spicy.
Yeah.
Not
it's that
hot,
Kentucky hug that Jimmy likes.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, I'm gonna move on to V since I had a taste of that one already. Kind of just keep this rolling on because Jeremy just keeps bringing glasses over, so we gotta figure out what this is gonna look like, right?
And figure out how we're gonna get home.
Oh, well, I think we'll figure it out. And so I guess you know, Paul, also when you're going into a blind tasting, is there anything that you're trying to keep top of mind or trying to think about, like, you know, are there certain notes you're trying to pull out? Like, what's sort of your mentality going into?
Like in a blind tasting or a barrel pick?
Blind tasting, what we're doing right now.
The blind tastings, man, I always just try to go for what I like. You know, I've never been, you know, one of those people that, you know, gets off on this is off profile, this is, you know, XYZ. I just like the old rustic, like you can taste the history in the juice, and that's what I like. So I usually try to pick something that I enjoy. You know, most of the people that, you know, I've had the pleasure of drinking with share the same opinions as far as what they like in their bourbon, and so when I try to, you know, go through a blind, I just choose what I like.
Okay. So you've had Ben, you've had W and V so far. So what's your do you have a preference so far?
V is lighter up front. It's a little sweeter, I think, on the front, and the spice doesn't come in nearly as hard. It still has a good finish on it, but it's hard. I'm actually get you hand me one of those waters. Help. I'm gonna give another sip.
The seem like a thicker texture to it too, as well.
It's real oily.
Yeah, real oily.
I actually had to go back to W because V was the first taste of bourbon for the day for me. So I don't know how much you guys have been preparing for this, but. You know,
we've been here since 10 a.m. drinking.
But I had to kind of go back and I was like, okay, I see what you're saying, because at first it was like very like creamy, and then I go back, I'm like, okay, there's the spice, because now it actually like warmed my tongue up a little bit, right? So I can definitely see that. Now I got to go back to V. Paul, what are your initial thoughts between W and V?
V was a lot lighter. You know, W I felt like had a lot more spice, and the finish was a lot longer on W, I feel like.
Yeah, V's more approachable for, you know, like say somebody was getting into it. That would be a much more approachable bourbon for someone to try.
Yeah, I agree.
But me, I like the big, bold finishes, so.
As do I.
That's what she said.
Yeah,
all right, so So let's try you now. Let's move on to you. It's actually, I don't know. I'll defer to somebody else if they can try to pick up different nosing, characteristics they can get out of it. I don't know. For me, just trying to keep the conversation going, so it's hard to pay attention a little bit to the different aromas that are coming out. Ben or Paul, is there something?
So I get rosewater, almond extract, dark cherries. I'm reading a Fred Minnick review.
Yeah.
from
That's exactly it.
from Whiskey Advocate. And when I read these reviews and people, I'm like, good Lord, how do they get this? I mean,
I've never been that
there's
guy.
30 different names, and
Sure.
I'm like, did he go to the dessert bar at Golden Corral? You know, he's just
Just got to
get at one of everything.
some cherry cobbler. Yeah, I know what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you pick out notes that are unique. I mean, obviously, you recognize your normal notes to you. I mean, and what is in your sensory. I mean, that's why they have those sensory labs at the distilleries. Is they want to isolate those notes so that they can pick them out. I mean, we don't sit in sensory labs. We drink bourbon, and so we're smelling them all together. So it's harder to always identify. And everybody, I mean, you notice when you catch a banana or when you get real nutty or mint, even are ones that really pick up. But on these, I mean, I've just got, you get that caramel, vanilla, I mean, baking spice. I mean, nothing really out of the ordinary on the nose on these.
Yeah, and this one for me, I mean, my first, so like the first one, I guess, was a lot of spice. The second one, was very easy, approachable, too sweet, not a lot of finish. This third one to me is like, feels like a perfect balance of sweet on the front end and spicy on the back end. Like, that's...
I was about to say, I think you might be my favorite out of all three.
Yeah, me too.
I don't know what you all feel.
I feel like it's a combination of V and W together.
I agree.
Yeah, it's a nice blend between them. I think that's something that people sometimes take for granted. I think you hear people talk about the first time they taste something, maybe how they didn't care for it and they let air get to it. I think people underestimate how other things they taste influence their palate. So tasting these three together, you is benefiting from the fact that it has a little bit of both, V and W. But on its own, if we tasted it on a different occasion, we might have completely different notes.
Yeah,
on what we
you're not
taste.
comparing it to something else.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about it in the show before. I think that's one thing that we get a little hung up on is, when you actually at the barrel pick and you're going through it and you're saying like, oh, but you have the rick house around you, have the smell, you have the aromatics, and they
and you're all hyper because you're picking a barrel.
And they alter that sensation, but you're still it's a fun time, right?
Oh, yeah.
So I think go ahead and get your final sips, and then we'll make a judgment on who's got the favorite here. I'm going back. Tried W again. Got that spice. Trying V again. A little bit more mellowed out.
Yeah,
But after the second one, V almost tastes pretty good. I mean,
I know it's funny revisiting the first one. I'm like, well, maybe I like that one a little better. But
all right, and I'll try you one last time.
I still think U's my favorite of the three.
yeah, use it for me. I mean, it's funny, after having you, it brought out a little bit better characteristics than the other one, but U's still it for me.
I mean,
It does. It comes in very nice. The finish is great.
Yeah.
Ben or Paul, I mean, do you think trying these in a particular order could skew it as well? To say that, if we would have tried U first rather than W, like it could.
Well, I think absolutely. But when you're talking about, like, what did we all say about W? Spice.
Yeah.
Well, so inherently a sweeter one is extra sweet after you started with spice. I mean, would we have gone the other way and said, too sweet and then like a nice amount of spice? Had we gone the exact opposite? Maybe. I mean, you can't go back and redo it at the same now. I mean, we can keep tasting.
We can reset.
Yeah, but it's not that easy, to change your mind after you started. And I mean, I always think that the first pour is always kind of spicy because you've got to acclimate. So when we gone back through, it still is the spiciest of the three.
Yeah.
But it doesn't taste as spicy now as that very first pour did, and I think that's just, you've got to acclimate a little bit to what you're drinking.
Yeah.
But I think, the sweetness and the finish on you is great.
I just ate a piece of pie before I came here, so
I mean, all three of these
my palates are pretty sweet.
I mean, I think that does have a lot to do with it too. Like I've told my wife several times, coming home from Jake's, everything always tastes better when you drink it here because you have the smoke in the air and you're just talking about bourbon nonstop. Yeah, it's just there's music going and. Whereas you're sitting, in your sweatpants on your couch, and you're like, this is okay. But everything tastes really good in this building for some reason.
All right, so Jeremy,
I think we're ready for the reveal.
we're ready for the reveal. Let us know.
So, but before we do the reveal, we just found out that these are all Russell Reserve barrel picks, right? There are 3 different ones. I know 2 of them what they're going to be. At least I know one of them is what we brought, which was Jimmy's Guard Shack, what was done on a prior episode that we had done with Ed Bly and Reed and Emerald and some other people, right?
Yep.
So,
What's your running order?
well, so
West Virginia University is where we're at.
Yeah,
right now.
WVU. So
Yeah.
what was W?
W is
Jimmy Gardens.
Was Jimmy's Guard Shack.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was kind of like dead last almost, right? It kind of had a lot of good stuff to it. V was
E is bluegrass berries.
Bluegrass Berries, and so this was
One that we picked.
another private pick of yours.
Yep.
Kind of talk about that one a little bit
You gotta
because
tell this story.
yeah,
Yeah, so when we got out there, I mean, you've picked at Russell's. I mean, anybody that's never gone, that should be on your bucket list because Eddie just rolls out barrels from every rick house, and you really, I mean, he stops you after maybe 7 or 8 and says, "Have you got something that you kind of like, or you have a direction?" Because he can take you from there. And, I mean, he knows the profile of every warehouse, which is incredible. Because if you tell him you're liking this profile, then he'll well, this barrel over here. You know, this barrel is creamy. This barrel's got that finish. Well, there was 2 barrels that were very notable on his note sheet when we were there doing the pick. One was Bruce's barrel, and he called it Twix. You know, he thought it was just tasted like candy. Another one was one that he said we get tons of like red fruits and berries, and it's just kind of a unique finish. Not something we get all the time. And so we went through and we tasted a few barrels. And we picked 1 barrel. We picked 2 barrels that day. One very traditional Russell's, big flavor, spice, and then we ended up also picking the berries. And we did it through a blind. It wasn't everybody's at first because it was kind of different than the other Russells that we were tasting. Kind of like we said here on the blind, sweeter. Didn't have as much spice. The finish didn't. The order I definitely think benefited what we did a little bit as far as how it worked out because your all's is spice forward.
I think that was premeditated.
Berries is sweet, and then
We're coming into your home turf. Wait till you come back to our bar.
Well, the actual third one here is the barrel that we passed on. It's actually the Twix barrel that Toddy's picked. So we passed on the Twix barrel that day because we chose berries over it, and we did our more traditional Russells. But the Toddy's Twix barrel gained a lot of appreciation. People were spending a ton of money on it, and you can taste it's a very enjoyable, sweet pour, and that's sweet like candy. Was kind of the story.
You.
U is Toddy's.
you is the Toddy's
Yeah,
pick.
so
Toddy's, all right.
that is the Twix barrel that. So we got
Go
to taste this
Guthrie.
one in the Rick House. But yeah, I mean, I think anybody that got any one of these 3 picks has got to be tickled. They're all delicious.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
that's always
You're nitpicking.
There's no losers in a 3-store pick blind of Russell's Reserve.
Don't patronize us.
Well, there is a loser, but we weren't going to bring it up. Now, I would drink. Obviously, all
say
3
we're
of
0
these.
for 1 right now.
I know.
Coming on top, right? So we're
Okay. We're 0 for 1. We're coming back.
For round 2.
all right. We'll time for round 2. So we'll move these out
Push
of the way
them
a
all to
little
the
bit.
center.
So you hear some glasses moving around. That would be why. If you want to, you can just mix all these together, and then we have
We'll start. I'm going to start
Yeah.
an infinity
What-
bottle. And then
There
an
you go.
infinity bottle of
Yeah.
Russells with all these, right? So
Spicy Twix berries.
It would
But
be
just
a
reset, eat the
It would
tortilla
be
chips.
Yeah,
Jimmy's
so-
Twix berries.
Yeah, Jimmy Twix berries.
so
4 roses snack of tortilla chips.
so there was something that Jake did bring out for everybody here, which is a palate cleanser. When you guys are doing these, he brought out some tortilla chips. Is tortilla chips something that you usually try too, or is it? Or do you just say like I don't need no
Just
palate
water.
cleanser?
Well-
like what do you all usually go to?
I think it
when you're-
depends on what the purpose of the tasting is. When we're doing single barrel picks, I mean, the idea of corn chips is that you're supposed to kind of clear you out. People do the smelling of their hand or arm to kind of clear their nose before they smell barrels. At home, I typically try to cleanse my palate with more bourbon. I feel like that always works. I always enjoy tasting more bourbon after more bourbon. So
Right.
there's never a wrong way. But I mean, water suffices most of the time.
Yeah.
I guess I should probably keep these lids on top so they hold the aromatics in a little bit, but we'll see what this is like. So we've got another lineup now. So we've got, it looks like either S or X, and then is that a 2 or an N? I don't know. Jeremy, you got horrible penmanship.
It's hard to
This
read
could
on
be a
Sharpie.
Y or an H. Yeah, backwards. It's a Y.
Y, X, and Z.
Y, X, and Z. Okay, cool. Well,
Missing a Z.
all right.
I think your Z is backwards.
Or no, I have a Z. I'm missing a Y.
Y.
Y right over here.
Sorry.
Thank you, sir.
Doesn't Z go the other way? Is that not a really jagged S?
It's okay.
Flip it upside.
Oh, upside down when you
Upside
wrote
down.
it. Yeah, when you wrote it, it was a Z. I got it.
Public schools, right? No, I'm just kidding.
I didn't have a mirror to look at it in.
It's okay. So, I guess another question, Ben, I'll throw it to you is, when you're going into blind tastings as well, Paul had kind of said, like, his mentality going into it. Like, do you have a specific way that you do these at home? Do you have your wife or a significant other, your dog, whoever, go pick out something, just like throw them on the table for you and just say, like, I'll come back and try them. Like, we'll try this out. Well,
and obviously today, I think these are kind of strategic as far as groupings of proof or types of barrels. And I think that's really where it comes down. If you're doing, one of the purposes of a blind sometimes is to remove those bias. Like maybe you're trying a bottle that's $400 on secondary against a $50 store pick. Yeah. And you're trying to remove that bias to value in your head, because you want to believe the bottle that was $400 is better. Yeah. Like, everything you believe inside of you says that. But also I think that like proof groupings is a huge thing. So
do you do by mash bills as well, like similar mash bills?
I like to have as many similarities as possible as far as like, that's kind of like the single barrel project or single oak project. You want to remove as many variables as possible and find the superior example of it. But I think that sometimes it's good to have, like, maybe you say, you know what, I'm a barrel proof guy, but you only ever taste barrel proofs. And maybe you line up some Russells or Knob Creeks or different ones that are maybe cut just a little bit, and maybe you end up picking those. You're like, well, I thought I was a barrel proof guy, but I like other high proof bourbons that maybe have been cut. So I think it's important that people maybe. If I don't know at all what I'm getting, my wife does my blind, the first thing I try to pick out is identify what I think the proof is, because I want to keep that fair. Like, because people I think mix up smooth and proof. Yeah, because I've never had an 80 proof bourbon that wasn't kind of smooth. Yeah, but it doesn't mean it was good. It was just 80 proof bourbon.
Yeah, I like how Bill Thomas says when they do reviews or anything or picks, you cannot use the word smooth in any description whatsoever.
Yeah, well, I think that's fair. And so typically I'll first, nosing is obviously the first thing you're doing, you're tasting anything. But then as I go through, when I'm judging them against each other, I try to keep it in relativity to what I think the proofs are. And then it's kind of just what you like. And then I think even after the results, you can sometimes rectify your decision, when you find out what they are. But, it makes sense that tasted better due to the proof difference or age difference or whatever it is. And that doesn't necessarily disqualify. Like our last one, there was no disqualified picks. They were all great. And it was easy to see how we literally had one that was named after candy that ended R3. Right. So it was super sweet. Like, it makes sense. Like, so you can kind of understand where you land on a blind after you find out. But we landed there organically, and then we were able to understand why we got there after we found out what they were. So that's kind of like it makes you feel good. Like, you didn't just go out of left field and say, right. Yeah.
I think it was kind of funny that we all unanimously said it too, right? Yeah. Like, we all came to the same exact agreement, and I don't think there was a whole lot of bias or influence that came into it.
I always follow groupthink. So whatever you all think is best here, I'm going to vote with you guys.
Follow the leader.
Yeah. So
are we starting with Y or Z?
Starting with Z, since that was the first one that came out. So we'll start with the next grouping here. But Paul, I want to ask you another question. Ben had brought up something good about trying to pick out a proof level when you're doing these blind tastings and try to set the baseline. Have you ever done something that's like a bottled and blind, or bottled and blind?
Bottled and blind.
What if you are bottled and blind? No, a bottled and blind tasting where you say, like, we're going to do all 100 proofs. Like, it doesn't, like, it's going to be 100 proof. Who knows? Yeah, have you tried something like that too?
I think we've tried just about everything, but I think that, when you get into that situation, you're looking for like complexity. You're looking for what the flavors that you like or that stand out to you the most. Because again, like Ben said, if you're at 100 proof, everything's gonna be semi-drinkable at that point. Nothing's gonna like choke you to death because it's so hot or anything like that. So I think at that point you're just gonna go for complex, big, flavor profile, enjoyable bourbons.
So I got a question for you guys, because I've done some barrel picks for liquor stores. Do they, and sometimes they try, they sway you to pick a certain way because they're like, this one's gonna sell, or that's versus us whiskey geeks like something a little more got some more oomph for unique, off the profile or whatever. So
I personally I feel obligated to pick to the audience, because like if we're picking for our group or like a barrel that's through a store that's going to predominantly go to our group, well then you don't have to go to the standard kind of releasings or easy drinking. But if you're picking a Buffalo Trace that's going to be sold, like I pick barrels for a store locally that is located on campus. Well, most of their demographic is college kids.
I can speak. It's Kentucky Tavern and Kentucky Gentleman, right? That's
so
and Coke right next to it.
So if I'm picking a Buffalo Trace that's 90 proof, I don't want to pick the spiciest Buffalo Trace that's ever been picked because that doesn't even make sense. They didn't buy 90 proof Buffalo Trace because they love spicy bourbon. But if you're picking that for a bourbon group, well, they might love this super spicy Buffalo Trace. And so I think it's a disservice to only pick to your profile because you aren't buying the whole barrel for yourself. So
that's a good point.
So I try to pick to
but you should
a combination.
If you can.
Yeah. I mean, so like the picks that we do, I think, and that's also your picking team, I think, represents a certain palate. And like, so if your palate is generally the same as most other people, then people are going to probably like your picks. We were having, me and Jamie were talking earlier, if everybody that picks your barrels loves rye whiskey only, well, they're even going to pick a bourbon that they like, but that may not be a bourbon that all the bourbon guys like. And like, that's where everything's so subjective. They weren't wrong.
Yeah.
They picked the best barrel for them. And so I think that's where it kind of comes into self-awareness of maybe not even picking what you would want to drink sometimes over what is most palatable for a certain store. And I think it's tricky.
Right.
It's a fine balance.
For sure.
All right, so let's talk about this first one real quick. So we tried Z. For me, like I smelled it, I got like plum and a lot of like dried fruits. I thought it was actually very enjoyable.
I got cigar smell on that. I'm kidding.
And you got. I think Jeremy was putting his ashes in there while we were up at the bar, right?
No, I kind of the same thing. Dried fruits,
I get citrus on it.
Yeah.
I really liked Z. I thought. I mean,
Yeah.
you could tell. I'm sure. Maybe I'm completely wrong. I'm sure this is probably going to be the Buffalo Trace round, right? Because it feels like it's a little bit lower in proof.
Yeah.
But I really enjoyed Z. I thought it was very, very good. I mean, it didn't have a super long finish, which
Most 90 proofs won't. Right.
but I think for what it is, like it has a lot of those fruit characteristics that I usually enjoy finding in one. So
Yeah.
Moving on to X next. I'm like trying to. It's always hard to nose in a rocks glass. It's like you're. Actually, it was listening to HQ the other day. When you're breathing, do you know what the predominant gas is that you're breathing in?
Carbon.
No, it's not oxygen either. It's nitrogen.
Nitrogen.
Yeah. So I learned that. So now you know when you're going through that nitrogen is something that you're predominantly. Now we're also a random fact show now, by the way. So
Yeah.
So who's tasted X so far, and kind of give your thoughts.
I'm just smelling.
See, X is like very good, but very, very sweet to me. Like,
I'll be honest. Between Z and X, that's actually pretty hard.
I think the battle between all night, like obviously we've kept things to barrel picks in general. And I think when you line up 3 90 proof of one expression, I expect the differential to be very small.
Yeah.
But I think the finish was a little longer
on Z.
On Z. I thought the finish was longer on Z.
Yeah, sorry, Z. Yeah.
But I do think X may have been a little sweeter, and I think sometimes sweetness just kind of muddles out those other flavors. You lose it because it's so sweet. So I mean, extremely palatable and good, but the finish wasn't as long for me.
Yeah,
Right.
I agree.
I mean,
and concur.
Group mentality. So who knows,
I'm
right?
following the leader.
All right, I'm gonna try X one more time, and then we'll move on over to Y, because we're gonna go in backwards order here.
Anybody recognize how much you don't taste enough low barrel or low proof stuff because we taste so many barrel bombs?
Yeah.
Jeremy does bring up a good point.
Yeah. It's almost it's like our palates are ruined. Not ruined, but
So subtle.
yeah, it's so light. It tastes so light, you know.
Yeah.
And so I'll ask you guys, like, have you ever done a barrel proof lineup, right? And trying to go back and forth, and is that harder or easier doing a blind versus something that is a 90 or something that's a Russell's that's like a 110? Like, where do you find that? What do you think's the happy medium there between barrel proof to 90 to 110? Like,
I think that distillery choice comes in to a big lineup there because obviously if you're talking about all barrel lineups from Knob Creek that are going to be 130 to 140 proof, from the barrel, that's a little different than if you're tasting straight from the barrel at Russell's or most MGP barrels. I mean, if you're talking about MGP, you're going to land in that 105 to 120 range 90% of the time. So I think distillery to distillery has a big jump
Yeah.
as far as what you get. But yeah, I've done plenty of, I try to keep a sample if I can of every barrel that I go on. Because I like to see how much it changed with water. I think the hardest thing about picking a good 90 proof is you're tasting barrel proof bourbon. Like, why do they even let you? Like, I mean, we want to taste it at barrel proof, but why do they even give us that option? Like, go in there and scientifically cut it to 90 proof for me so that I don't fall in love with one at barrel proof and it doesn't respond well to water, because that's happened too many times. Everybody knows a guy that went on a Knob Creek pick and loved it at 138 proof. Thought it was one of the best bourbons they've had all year. And then they got it at 120. Like, man, it's not the same bourbon,
right?
And so I think that it's.
So what do you do? You carry a flask in? Like, how do you walking away? You gotta share the secrets of how you're walking away with these samples.
Well, what I'd like to say is there's a fifth. I plead the fifth, and I'm not going to incriminate myself on my tactics. But if you'd like to sample some of our barrels straight from the barrel, you can come back.
There
to
we
the
go.
house.
We're gonna be like, watch out for Ben.
Yeah, so he
Carrying in.
bring a rum runner
I did
with
get
you.
shut down at one of our last picks
you did.
with grand fashion. So it didn't work out.
That's funny. All right, so let's God, this is, I'm gonna tell you what, this is tough.
Yeah.
I think Y has the best nose for sure.
Y to me has the best finish out of all of them for me. It just
I think it has the
sits.
biggest front.
Yeah.
I agree.
I'm going back and starting from the beginning. So I'm going with Z again, and I'll hit X, and I'll hit Y again. But
Y just hits you and it stays.
It's pretty, it's pretty big. I mean, especially when we're talking about low proof. I mean, it's more. I think it's got a little bit more viscous to it. Like, it sticks around your mouth a little bit more. I
like that word, viscous.
I don't normally watch the legs when we're drinking out of rocks glasses, but I don't really compare them. Normally, I'm a snob, and I try to look at that and see, but I haven't really paid close attention to see what I thought had more legs. But that one tastes like it has legs.
What does the
for
legs do for you?
Well, that's
The finish.
Yeah, that's normally how oily it is. So when you swirl it around, like you see those thick, long lines on your glass, that's going to be a really oily bourbon normally, and that's what sticks all over your mouth. When that's what you normally get. That's radio gold for the podcast.
and so Paul,
We're still waiting for that song breakout.
Yeah,
Has it been 13 minutes?
yeah.
Hope we all love
We're
ice
a little
cube.
past that. Paul, another question for you. You know, when you're going on these barrel picks, and one of the things
That's a
that
tough one.
is a kind of a recent phenomenon is the whole thing of NCF. Oh, we want an NCF. You got to ask it for name, by name when you go to Buffalo Trace. You go to Russell's, it's just always NCF. What do you think is the attraction there, or do you think it's just a bunch of hoopla and hype, and then it's just kind of like just let people just think whatever they want to think?
I kind of think it's a little bit of a bandwagon type of thing, because the only way to really know the difference, from my understanding, is that you'd have to have the exact same bottle that was NCF in the same barrel that was also non-NCF, and I don't think that's ever been done. But I honestly, maybe for like color-wise and stuff, I don't really think it would change the flavor. But I mean, I could be dead wrong. I don't honestly have no idea. I think it's more of a bandwagon thing. Somebody was like, "Hey, you can get, X amount of dollars more if you put NCF on this," and that's what they do.
I think the idea is kind of the same thing where people love barrel proofs. It's the untouched thought process, and like, so when they hear non-chill filtered, they think of it as being a less tampered with product. So therefore, I must like it more. And the whole reason that chill filtering is a thing is because they don't want your bourbon to look cloudy when you chill it. I mean, that's what it all comes down to. So lower proof bourbon, when you put it in the freezer, if you're not a bourbon guy and you do that anyway, then it gets cloudy if you have non-chill filter bourbon, because it has these lipids and oils that are still in it. And they only show up when it's really cold.
But does that change the profile?
Well,
like
you said, it's never actually been done with the same single barrel side by side, and so it's not a fair comparison to take two OWA barrels and one's NCF and one's not and taste them side by side, because they're both single barrels. They're going to be different anyway. We're tasting side by side products now. We're having a hard time telling the difference between them.
Now's the moment of truth, though.
Yeah.
So
Pick your horse.
So what do you, Ryan? Where do you kind of stand?
All right, so X, I'm eliminating. It just doesn't do it for me. But it's just too sweet, not much finish for me. But Z and Y, I literally have gone back and forth, and I cannot distinguish the two. I don't know. I initially think Z, but I don't know.
I'm gonna let you guys decide. So Paul, where do you stand right now?
I'd go with Y. It would be my favorite of the, and then followed by Z and then X, because I agree with you. X just
It's very sweet.
It's super sweet and not a whole lot of finish.
All right, Ben.
Man, we better not go over 2.
Where do you stand, Ben?
as I'm going back, I mean, they're less differentiable than I thought they were the first time through when I go back to Z and Y. Give me one more last sip.
It's like you almost like coat your mouth and then you like hit them real quick, right?
Right.
So.
I think if you relabel these, I might pick them reverse 3 times. I'm gonna go with Z. I think it's got a little bit more like on the mid palate. That part, like right after you swallow it, before you really get to the finish, like that part's still on your tongue. I feel like that lingers just a little bit more on Z. And I mean, I always want to taste my bourbon, so I don't like it when it goes away too fast. I'm not a short finish guy. So.
Jeremy, are you sure these aren't the same?
Just make it sound like complete jackasses talking about.
Doing blind tastings.
No,
awesome.
I think I'm Z, but by a slim margin.
It's slim margin, but I would easily put Z up there. Honestly, I don't know. I didn't mind X too much. I don't know.
I did not hate X.
No, I didn't hate it.
I think mine might go ZXY, but I think Z was the winner for me. So, Jeremy, let's hear who was.
We've got 3 Buffalo Trace, all store picks. We've got Tipsy Buffalo pick out of Liquor Mart Nicholsville by Bluegrass Tipsy Buffalo. We have the collaboration pick of Bourbon Pursuit, and we have the Bourbon Review magazine's 2017 pick.
Okay, so let's start off with everybody. Most people didn't like X as much. So what was X?
I like this bourbon a lot.
Oh man, it was ours. It was ours. So that was the Bourbon Community Roundtable one. Well, that's. I put it second.
We're not airing this.
I like to reiterate though the whole point was that all 3 were so good. Like there wasn't like a huge difference between
and
these.
Importantly, they're all better than regular Buffalo.
Absolutely.
I think
nobody would.
I think
if we had lined up a
first.
4th that was just off the shelf Buffalo Trace, it would have clearly lost, like by a wide margin, because these are all superior barrels.
And why? What's why?
Why is Bourbon Review's 2017 pick?
And that means that
The Tipsy Buffalo
comes out
myth, the
ahead
legend.
and actually
wins the blind.
actually deserves its recognition in that bourbon world of.
I can't even take a bow while I'm sitting.
That's amazing. I'm surprised that's how it worked out. That's really cool.
Well, I just think that goes to, I mean, had the same barrels been laid out in front of us on your day and vice versa, we probably picked the same barrels. Like, we're all bourbon drinkers. We have similar palates.
We need to do this at Kenny's house.
Yeah, and so, like, I mean, had we been laid out the barrels that you all got, we probably picked your barrel. You know, it was probably by far the best barrel that day. And I mean, that's my whole thing is there's so much luck involved. I mean, it's easy to take it to your head, but well, we picked the best, but we can only pick the best barrel put in front of us. And so there's so much luck involved in the best barrel picking that it's hard not to take that. Well, I wanted these.
Sorry, we got one more wine tasting to kind of go through
Men have
here.
places to be, things to do.
This is the only show of the day. They act like they've already recorded somewhere today.
So we got one more to go through, and as Jeremy brings these out, the one thing that I know our audio listeners can't see is that this one is significantly probably darker, right? So we're gonna be looking at probably a if my memory serves me correct, it's probably a barrel proof MGP, which I kind of want to, we've talked about it before on the show. Paul, I'll kind of get your take on this. Ryan said it before. It says like, is there any way that you can get a barrel proof single barrel anymore that isn't MGP? Like, is there anybody else on the market that offers something like that that's outside of MGP?
Four Roses.
True.
Four Roses is one, yeah.
But I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's very, I don't know. Four Roses is a little bit different. I think it's a huge profile difference, right?
Well, I think that's actually part of their hard time and like why some of their picks don't get kind of huge recognition. Is you have 10 recipes,
right?
And even I guarantee you, I mean, we all hang out with huge enthusiasts, right? I mean, like we're all bourbon geeks,
yeah.
And a high percentage have never had all 10.
Mm-hmm.
And they may own hundreds of bottles and have never tasted all 10 Four Roses. I think it's a lot of variety for people to try to sort through to know what they like. So it is different. I mean, MGP, you think high rye, low rye, barrel proof. You've got obviously your smooth amblers, your Boone Counties, your OKIs. You've got some options out there that are barrel proof options. But I mean, obviously there are fewer single barrel choices at barrel proof outside of MGP, but I think that's because your smaller operations have to offer the experience. I mean, what do they have? They don't have volume. They don't have low cost. So they're trying to give you the experience of single barrel proof. Everybody else has huge volume, low cost because they are the manufacturer, the ager, the bottler. And so I think that's why you see more people that source from MGP offering what we want. Is because they have to please us because they need us. Like they need our market support.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's a demand in the market for that, I think, and because the big distilleries are now, they're not offering those anymore, and so this is our only option.
And that's when you get the one-offs, the Mike Drops of the world, the Boone Counties, and some other things that these are. I mean, they basically say that they are barrel-proof MGP. Like that's the only ones that are on the market, right? So you don't see that coming from a Heaven Hill. You don't see it coming. I mean, of course, Four Roses, but a lot of those are private picks, right? It's not a standard offering, right? That's the weird thing is that it's just not a standard offering that you can always just find on the shelf.
Yeah.
Your smaller distillers, you'll find it at too. Like Bell Mead does it. Their store pick.
Bell Mead is a good one as well.
Your small guys,
but they're still selling MGP.
That's MGP.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's another example of MGP.
Right. But I think as your smaller guys hit their 4-year marks, as Wilderness Trace and all those Wilderness Trail hits those 4-year marks, you're going to start seeing because that's how they're going to make their splash into the marketplace.
Sure. Well,
just come here and get a barrel-proof single barrel store pick.
Absolutely. I mean, even like Barrel House. I don't know if you all have ever dealt with them downtown Lexington and Manchester.
We just passed in.
On the way here, we were like, who are these guys?
It just shows like how we're all kind of encapsulated in time. Like you don't realize how much time has passed. They have 10-year distillate of their own now. That they don't have much of it, but they're trying to figure out what they're going to do with the 10-year release of their own distillate. So I think it's an exciting time.
Probably bottle up and sell it is a smart idea. But,
whatever, 15 years, But I think it's fun that we're going to start to see a ton of these guys that we think of as non-distiller distributors are really coming to time now where we're going to have a ton of new product on the market that we don't know who's going to have. I mean, we all talk about you've got Brown Foreman's banana barrels, and you've got I get tons of Circus Peanuts on single barrel Jim Beam.
I haven't heard that one in a while. Circus Peanuts, huh?
But you get these different notes. But it's fun to wait and see what kind of notes we're going to get from all these new people entering the market. It's going to be a fun time, I think, the next couple of years.
And so we have our next lineup right here, and these are OKIs if I'm not mistaken, right?
Well,
these are not the OKIs. One of them's an OKI, one's
so
not.
Possibly two MGPs going against each other.
Yeah, we'll go against it. But so not a lot of people have had a chance to go and pick a barrel from OKI. So Paul, give us some, if you were there on it, kind of give us your impression of what that is comparison to say Wild Turkey when you go and you tried 12 barrels, Buffalo Trace when you're like you got the 4 to choose from in front of you, like that's it. When you go to somebody that's straight up NDP, I mean they are distilling now, but they don't really have any of their distillate out. But what is that process and how is it any different?
Well, that was very special because they were just so welcoming. That I don't think you can find a better group of people to host you in bourbon at all. They were super friendly. They, took us on an awesome tour. They even let us taste some of their actual distillate that they had, and it was very good for 4 years. I mean, you're not in the rick house. You don't get the smells and stuff of the rick house while you're tasting the bourbon. But I mean, obviously, that doesn't mean everything because the barrels that we picked were absolutely phenomenal.
Mm-hmm. All right, so I don't know if anybody's had S yet. I just tried it.
Yeah.
I don't know what you guys called this one. I would have called it coconuts because I got a lot of coconut.
This may not be our pick.
I got a lot of coconut flavor out of this one. I thought it was. I'm an Almond Joy guy myself, so I love that kind of flavor profile. What do you all think about S so far?
I'm a fan guy.
It's probably the best thing we've had today. I think
it is.
It'd be the highest.
I'm with you.
Sure.
I was thinking of a very probably along lines with a coconut, like a pina colada almost kind of type flavor.
Actually, it's very much a coconut.
I know that's pretty much coconut, but but you got a lot of those cherry flavors and the oranges and stuff as well in there. I think for me.
New Riff was also the only place, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, because we've done a few barrel picks now, but aside from Wild Turkey, New Riff was the only place we got to actually have the tasting from the master distiller. Mm-hmm. Right? Everybody else we've dealt with a representative or a
Well, I
tasting
mean,
brew.
when you go
New
to
Riff
Wild
was-
Turkey, there's
Well-
always Jimmy or Eddie there, right?
Right.
Eddie did do
But
it.
aside from Wild Turkey, New Riff was the first time the master distiller took us through the whole tasting process,
Yeah.
which was kind of cool.
Which he hates the name Master Distiller. Jay Wheel was like,
Yeah.
and I don't like that term. Which I think that it's a funny change because like when you look back when Jimmy became Master Distiller at Wild Turkey, like it just meant like manufacturing foreman.
You're liable now.
You were like you were just the manager. Like it didn't like now it's kind of this like really lofty position.
You
like
travel the world.
yeah, you're this ambassador of the product, and I mean, if you're not a well-established company, you're also like a chemical engineer and everything else. But it's kind of funny when you think about it wasn't such a laudie thing to be back in the day.
It's amazing. I don't know what these are. They're so different.
That's what for me.
Yeah.
For me,
I assume they're 2 MGP products, but
but the way I look at this, and I think a lot of bourbon enthusiasts, I don't want to use the word aficionado because I think that sounds smug, but a bourbon enthusiasts that really get into this, the way that I sit there and I taste these two, I sit there and say, well, what are the most discerning notes? I tried tea. I'm like, okay, bourbon, vanilla, caramel, toffee, pretty standard, right? And I could probably find tea in a Maker's Mark Private Selection. I could probably find tea in another MGP. I could find it in a barrel proof Willet. I could probably find that. But S really stood out. When I find something that has such a strong presence like that coconut feel, I was like,
Yeah.
that's unique.
This is one of those special bottles. I can.
Yeah, and it's not to say that it's any better.
No.
Right? I don't think that. I think it's just it's unique.
It's so unique. Yeah.
And that's what I think is really awesome about this process is you don't have a label bias. You don't have that, right?
Sure.
So that's what I found really cool about
Tastes
it.
even better with a cigar.
It tastes.
Yeah,
and
where's ours?
Jake yells though. He's like even better with a cigar. Well, we might have to try that in a little bit. We'll see how much time we have.
Ben made a comment earlier too. If you're doing barrel and I recommend everybody do blind tastings at home. So some of the most fun we'll have during the summers when I'm barbecuing and my wife will set up blind tastings for everybody. It's one of the most fun things we do in bourbon. But don't be afraid to a month later, 2 months later, try the same lineup again and see how that same group of people rank that same lineup the second time. You might be surprised.
Yeah.
I've done that. I've only done it once. And I'm very happy to say that we tasted 8 bourbons and our top 2 stayed the same. But after that, the field got scattered.
Jimmy brings up a pretty good point. Paul, I want to pick your head and as well as Ben as well. So when you are doing something blind, I mean, we've gone through 7 at this point, but we were trying to compare 3 at first, and now 2. He mentioned 8. Like, is it really hard to put 8 against each other? Except, is it a lot easier to just like narrow the field?
I think it's hard to put 8 together because I feel like after a certain point you just burn your palate out.
Yeah.
Especially if you're, at like Russell, you're picking like a Russell's barrel, you're tasting 10, samples at barrel proof, you're going to burn out quick or you're just going to be hammered drunk. So, I mean,
Yeah.
I think it's easier to, pick your everyday choice if you're doing like 2 or 3 but when you get to 8, it gets pretty scattered.
Yeah, I was on a pick with the 17 IB guys at Willett's, and Drew was like, "Guys, after 10, I'm not giving you any more because it's palate fatigue. You'll,
Right.
Drinking barrel proof all day, your palate's just you're not gonna be able to decipher the differences anymore."
So, biggest instance I've ever had of that is we actually went to Smooth Ambler with Ed Bly, and we were picking barrels. We were picking, our specific group was actually picking the mythical pick. Ed picked 4 barrels that day. Cleveland Bourbon
So you're
Society
behind the
picked-
mythical pick.
I'm not behind it. I'm involved with it.
He was there.
But we had Go Big Blue, Cleveland Bourbon Society, and Steve Ha, who most people know picked his own barrel because he's a big Smooth Ambler guy. But we tasted 24 barrels that day. And I've never been more scared of palate fatigue than I had ever been that day because we didn't pick one barrel out of all 8 barrels selected out of the first 10 we tasted. and what are the statistically, what are the chances that not one of the first 10 barrels you taste are going to be selected? So we were all kind of actually worried about our selections. I think everybody was pretty happy at the end of the day.
Well, yeah.
But we ate whole bags of corn chips. You've never seen more panicky, like just scared eating of corn chips. Yeah, you were worried because when everything in the second group of 10 tasted better than the first group, you get really paranoid. Because at Smooth Ambler, the great thing about their pick was you just pointed a barrel and you'd go drill it and you'd get a glass and you'd spile it yourself, and you didn't know necessarily even if it was high rye or low rye. You're just like, I'm tasting that one, I'm tasting this one.
Yeah.
And so then you're like, well, I'm drunk and I don't know if it's good, and I'm just going to keep drinking these. But I mean, ultimately we were all happy, at the end of the day. But we had to wait till it came to bottling
to actually figure out.
Did we do okay? How drunk were we when we picked these? I mean, there were some great barrels because Ed had that 119 proof cork and bottle Smooth Ambler that was, just an awesome pick. Cleveland Bourbon Society got a monster barrel that day. So shout out to those guys if they're listening. But those are fun because we got to taste something.
Lentz, right?
Yeah, it's Lentz. Paul, I'll run one more by you before we start doing the reveal and wrapping this up. Because Ben brings up a pretty funny thing, when you look at what master blenders do, you do these people that do it on a very large scale. They do it for consistency, they do it for profile. They put it in their mouth and they spit it out, right? They want to get that. However, the people that go and do these barrel picks, I don't think anybody's ever spit anything out, as far as my knowledge.
I have poured some out, but not
maybe poured, but I mean, when you're tasting, like you don't typically do that.
You have to know the finish.
And so by the time you think you find something, you've gone through a few barrels, trying to barrel proof, and you're like, yeah, this is the one. Like, do you think that it deserves more or less praise than like standard profile stuff that's on the shelf? Like, what do you think is like the idea behind to say like, oh, I and my group, like, we can pick something and we're out there just like having a great old time, versus somebody's like whose job is in a lab coat, like saying like, nope, this is actually the profile it's supposed to be, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think that it does, because we're all in this bourbon community. It's somewhere you're a member of some form of group or whatever, and I think that if you have a team of people that go on a certain day and you all get together and you all put your collective thoughts into a barrel and you all agree on it, I think that bottle then represents your guys as a group. As far as like having a lab coat on and just throwing some stuff together and be like, this is what it's supposed to taste like, I don't think that means quite as much. And bourbon nerds are sentimental. At the end of the day, they all care about one thing, and they all, I don't know, bond over it. So I think when you grab that bottle that has that group tag on it, you're like, I remember what we were doing this day, what we talked about, what it smelled like in the rick house or wherever, and I think there's memories in that bottle. I think that's why it means so much. Yeah.
All right, so it's time for the reveal, and I'm gonna go ahead. I'm gonna take a stab at this because Jeremy brought over.
I was not expecting this.
He brought an OKI 12-year, one of their private picks. It only had 72 bottles in the barrel, so short barrel. Is their Ricky Bobby pick.
118 and a half.
Just real quick, why Ricky Bobby?
Well, we were the first group that got to pick of their 12-year stock. So we actually picked 2 barrels that day, and we tossed around a lot of names. Like, we're the first group. What do you call it? So, if you're not first, you're last. And we also, so the other barrel that we selected, and you all are welcome to try it. We didn't want to line up in a blind because we knew we were stacking up. We also picked the early bird barrel, and same concept. We were the early birds. We got there and got to pick barrels first. So
you got the worm, right?
Yeah. Well, we got the barrel, and that was just the idea. If you weren't first, you're last. We just happened to be first, and that was it. We were fortunate enough to get to pick, and also we picked 2 short barrels that day, and so I've not seen another barrel come out as short as ours as other store picks have hit. I mean, obviously we didn't know they were short barrels.
So I've been on barrel picks, and the short barrels have always been some of my favorites. Is that the same case for you all?
Not necessarily exclusively, but I think that obviously short barrels, I think, are indicative of either movement in and out of the wood, like too much maybe is the idea, and obviously wood imparts at least half the flavor. So a short barrel, it has a lot more barrel influence normally, and that's that's why 20-plus-year-old bourbons are really popular. And I think that's the idea, is we got more barrel influence because it was a short barrel.
Right.
Short barrels have made our final cut on tastings everywhere except for Four Four Roses is the exception to the rule, but everywhere else
That's just that last Four Roses, isn't it?
yeah, last Four Roses was the only time. That was the only time a short barrel didn't make the final.
And then so just the last bottle they brought out beside that OKI was just a standard. It's not really too standard, but Colonel E.H. Taylor's barrel proof. This was 128.1. I'm going to go ahead and take a stab at it. That the S was the Colonel Taylor barrel proof, and that T was OKI. Drum roll, please.
I'll let you say because I've forgotten at this point.
So I can't, dude. It's all
Yeah,
dark underneath. We can't see that.
I thought T was the barrel.
I thought
proof.
T was the barrel proof.
Yeah.
You know, T was the barrel proof.
Yeah.
T is E.H. Taylor barrel
Oh wow.
proof.
Yeah.
And the S is the OKI. Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
S is the okay.
S is
Yeah, I was
okay.
gonna say.
Because it's got a really sweet profile.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because for some reason, like I see a lot of Buffalo Trace products, and I get a lot of those sweet characteristics, those sweet
Yeah.
flavors out of it, and
This
that's
one
what
had a lot
that's
of
what I thought I
floral,
gravitated towards.
notes.
Did anybody else on the E.H. Taylor pick up, like, I get lots of, like, that dry citrus, kind of like a Granny Smith apple kind of citrus,
Yeah.
like that almost tart note that you get on
I
there.
got like I was eating potpourri or something.
Yeah, I mean, I
there's a
think
lot
that-
of floral.
How
like,
much potpourri have you eaten
Well,
at this point?
you know,
out of curiosity.
I have a weird habit. But no,
we don't
okay.
judge
S was. I tasted it
it was
immediately,
so
and
much
it was
better.
just like,
Yeah.
you know, you just know when you taste something good. It immediately hits, and you're like, that's it. You know, that,
Yeah,
that was
well,
that's a
I
great
think-
pick.
Well, I think also, like, people sometimes associate high rye as everything spicy and, like, oh, I don't like high rye, I like sweet. Well, what I don't think they realize is that, like, your high rye a lot of times yield all of those, you know, the baking spice, sweet notes that you want later. High rye young is not so sweet.
Yeah, I think we had this conversation last week. I remember this.
We
It's
may
coming
have,
back
but,
to me.
but like, I think once you cross that like 9 to 10 year range, like high rye shows itself really well. It's not super spicy. I mean, this is a really sweet. I mean, at 100, it's easy drinking at 118 and a half
Yeah,
proof.
it's very approachable,
and it's
one of those
sweet, and
danger bourbons because
Oh, yeah.
it's like it tastes like an 80 or 90. You know, and I mean, it just goes down so easy. You can guzzle
Yeah.
this stuff.
But I mean, everything at OKI is the high rye profile because they're big on that whole LDI background that they came in from because they had the same training when they started distilling. So I just think, I mean, I'm a Russell's guy. Turkey's known for being a high rye distillery. OKI is all high rye. But I just think that sometimes people close their mind. Oh no, I only like sweet.
Yeah.
And they don't realize how sweet of profile can come from a high rye bourbon.
That's awesome. So let's go ahead and close it out. I want one more pour of this OKI because it was actually fantastic.
No, that's my personal bottle.
Well,
and
that's
you're
too
cut
bad.
off.
That's too bad. Then we're not going to air the episode. No, I'm just kidding. Guys, I want to say thank you so much.
I just want a little
Yeah,
splash.
it was definitely a pleasure talking to you all. There's a few takeaways from here. One, they pick better barrels than us.
Yeah, but I think they just rolled out better. They've been in it longer.
Hey,
we've
I
only
like the
done
humility
two, so they're
approach.
Yeah,
but they did. No, there's no doubt.
This was a fun experiment.
Maybe we can merge. And
Yeah, I know.
We'd love to pick
Yeah,
one with
let's
you
do
all.
it.
Yeah, if you all
Yeah.
want to come on a pick with us, we'd love to do it.
We can
Yeah.
do that. We can do a split label, right? We'll figure something
No,
out.
it's still our label. We're just letting you attend.
They don't want our name attached to that.
Split sticker. Split sticker.
Split sticker.
I have to
Yeah.
make 2 stickers.
Ben's also the guy that makes all of our stickers.
Yeah, there you go.
I have a printing company, so it makes it. That's why
so
we
it's definitely
are
a win-win.
insistent on having fun stickers because we have access to make things.
Play to your
Yeah.
strengths.
Yeah, but and then this all actually goes credit to Paul because Paul reached out and
Yeah,
said,
thank
we
you so
should
much.
do a blind tasting. Like, let's put your Buffalo Trace pick next to our Buffalo Trace pick, and let's really figure this out. And Tipsy Buffalo came out ahead.
It won.
Like, kudos to you all. Like, it was fantastic. It was. I don't know if it does. There's no such thing as a $150 Buffalo Trace. But, congratulations,
Yeah.
guys.
Yeah, you made it.
You did something.
It hit 175 just to make sure we
Yeah,
aren't cutting
just-
ourselves short. And had any of us we got a little bit of flack. There
Oh,
were some
big
people
time.
not happy
Who about
with
pallets?
it. I own 2 bottles.
Yeah.
So it's not like we knew that we were about to inflate the market and go, crazy with it. But I mean, obviously, we were happy to see people like the label, and that's 90% of the people that spent a ton of money had never tasted it. Had nothing to do with what we just did today. Like the tasting that we did, nobody bought it because it tastes better. They bought it because it was a fun label, and they didn't have it on their bar. And most of the people were out west, and they don't know anything about bourbon. Sorry, guys. No, but,
don't say that. We got a lot of California listeners.
California is its own country now, right? And
they're trying to be.
Yeah. Good luck.
But they have a lot of good barrel-aged beer out there. But I think we can say that for another episode. But, fellas, I want to say thank you again for doing this.
So much. This was great.
Yeah, if there's... I'll let you guys give a plug for anything else. If there's a way that people can either find out more about you, about Bluegrass, quote-unquote, group, like, kind of what does that look like?
So anytime you're anywhere near Nicholasville, you can stop in at Jake's Cigar Bar, and Jeremy is the bartender here, and every bartender here, is familiar with our group. It's kind of like our place that all of our members go.
It's a hub. It's a hub, if you will.
It is a hub.
Right. Yeah.
So anybody that wants to know anything can either come to Liquor Mart in Nicholasville or Jake's Cigar Bar and learn anything you want to know about our group and our members.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. And Ben, thank you as well for being on here. And thank you to Jake and Jeremy for hosting us at Jake's Cigar Bar in Nicholasville today. It was a pleasure being able to come here. We can smell the aromatics in the air. He threw some Jake's cigars here on the table. He says, hurry up and smoke them, guys. But, this was a fun episode. So make sure if you've got a friend of a friend of a friend that lives somewhere in this area, I'm sure they might be in the group. They might be able to add you, and you can at least see the conversations. Probably can't get a pick, but you can at least see the conversations. And so make sure you check them out. Make sure you're also following Bourbon Pursuit on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. If you like what you hear, make sure you support the show on Patreon, patreon.com/Bourbon Pursuit. Also, if you want all the new episodes beamed straight to your inbox, go to bourbonpursuit.com and sign up for our mailing list or our newsletter.
And what was that, Jake? Facebook?
Jake's Facebook.
Yeah, Jake's Facebook.
You don't have
Make
to
sure
know anybody to like it.
you don't have to know someone to like the page. So just like Jake's Cigar Bar.
Except everyone of all creeds.
And please come. And it's a great place. I've had a great time here. I was thinking in my mind, what a great place. In Louisville, we really don't have a place like this where a bourbon community can come, hang out, talk to the bartenders, do a blind taste testing, at the bar. I mean, this is a
set
great
up some
place.
microphones and make a day out of it.
I still think it was rigged. So I'd like to do this back at our home turf.
Let's do it.
Next time y'all want to go head west on 64, let's do this again.
We can make it happen.
No, but this was super fun, man. I really appreciate y'all having us.
Thank you guys for having us.
And guys, if you have any show suggestions, feedback, comments for the show, we love hearing from our audience. So please keep that coming, and we'll see you next time.